Welcome back to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network. We're talking about big data and we're talking about big projects. I was going to throw it over to you, Henry. Give us some insight as to what you're seeing. You see, you have a big opportunity to see a lot of things across the ecosystem. Give us an example of a program that you all are working on that you'd like to highlight.
Yeah, thank you. And one, I'm just excited to hear the incredible work that Tom and Michael are doing in the DoD with Advana and just the insights that they're gaining. It's in part supported by Cloudera. And so, and another example, I think that one piece Tom highlighted is critical, and that's in gaining actionable intelligence from real-time data, and that it's more important than ever. We recently were working on a survey with Meritalk, and they surveyed over 150 government executives and showed that nearly everybody's focused on the importance of data, which I think is obvious. That's why we're here. And 85% saw that streaming data was key to modern decision-making. But what was interesting about it, only 53% had a formal strategy for streaming data. And less than a third of those were actually confident in their ability to gain insights from data originating from a variety of different sources. And, you know, something that's near and dear to everybody is like this quarantine period. And one of the important pieces of work that we were doing was with a research organization that is working to find treatments and a vaccine for COVID-19. And similar to some of the things that Tom has been doing a lot of innovation in taking legacy batch systems and moving them to more real time. We were working with this group that was using legacy techniques to ingest data, and they were, you know, think about how fast the COVID spread was happening. They were doing data analysis on a batch process once a day, and what we worked with was to help them create a real-time data analysis pipeline that was flexible enough to onboard a multitude of new data sources very quickly. And it was really critical to leading to significant advances in their research. And I think it's a really incredible example. And it's an example for the broader public sector space, is that you can no longer depend on a static set of data sources, and that real time is incredibly important. And it's something very interesting that we're involved with.
And look, we're living in a real-time world, so we have to be able to process and store, analyze this data in a real-time way, right? I mean, that's just a fact, full stop. Ron, how about, and glad to see, by the way, that you all are right smack in the middle of that, enabling that for all of these entities. Ron, you know, look, first of all, congratulations on the manned space flight out of Kennedy Space Center to the International Space Center. And every time I turn around, you're sending a rocket to Mars, you know, yeah, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of good capability happening at NASA these days. Tell us about one project that you're working on using this big data to sort of, you know, make it happen, if you will, over there at NASA.
So yeah, it really is an exciting time to be here, Luke. You know, we have missions being launched, it seems, every week down at Kennedy. You know, we have a couple Falcon 9s going up later this month, and a Starlink Falcon 9 going up. And next year we have the Webb telescope launching. So these are really big programs for exploration going up, and we haven't missed a beat. So what we're doing, much like what we heard, you know, from Tom about earlier, is putting up a visualization layer for our data, and we're calling that initiative the Executive Decision Lens. And what we noted is early on in the COVID crisis, our medical community was spending a lot of time on contact tracing and really getting sort of the lay of the land. So we got a group together and worked across multiple domains at NASA. You know, we had HR involved, and the HR folks were actually the product owner of this Executive Decision Lens. And that worked well in an agile environment. It allowed us to come together and be there to bring data to answer questions about our profile. You know, what is our profile for each of our centers? You know, how are the cases looking? And before we stood that up, Luke, it was I think the chief medical officer was spending all day Friday gathering local data up putting it in a spreadsheet and trying to come up with some normalization across the geographic areas for decisions about, what is our posture? When do we want to make sure our employees are really protected? So we quickly saw the need and stood up, exactly. And Tom, I just want to foot stomp a lot of what you said, a way to get in disparate data sets and put in APIs in the cloud that's very agile. You don't need a lot of the the ATOs setting up disparate systems for this. So we saved a lot of time in the medical community. We actually stood up a contact tracing app that was based on what a lot of the state and local communities were doing at the time, and we have that capability. I think we are one of the first agencies that has a contact tracing app, to my knowledge, and working across the federal community. We were able to normalize data, use data definitions that were standardized, so we were all looking at the same posture the same way. Because Luke, as you know, a lot of these locations where we have our federal workforce are co-located. We have the DoD in many of our sites, for example. So we, if we didn't have that normalization done and looking at these definitions across, we would be reporting different things. And, people are smart. They talk to one another, even though they're in separate agencies, and they say, hey, your agency's saying this, this agency's saying something completely different. So this allowed us to really work together as a one community. And what we're doing with the executive decision lens is make it scalable. So we're putting in the groundwork to make it scalable for other data sources as well. So, it is just a fantastic effort at coming together and making our people safe in this uncertain times. It is very important.
And done very, very quickly. And yeah, as I said, NASA has had a banner year at this point. So, the show had to go on, and it did go on. It's really impressive to see that. I'm glad that you all have also sort of laid the tracks down to reuse this capability going forward. John, let's jump over to you at BMC. Tell us about a specific project. Once again, you have the opportunity to look across the landscape here. Why don't you highlight for us a specific project that you all have been involved in that has taken big data to sort of new heights, if you will?
Yeah, so I mean, we do have an opportunity, again, as we're looking across both public and private sectors, we do have an opportunity to get exposed to a lot of really, really cool things, a lot of which you guys and gals are hearing today from this crew. Here most recently, we were working with, and by the way, this is a very common concept of a use case, but we've been working with certain manufacturers that make really, really big vehicles on the planet. They have this opportunity to collect a tremendous amount of data from the vehicles that they have on the streets. And what they need to be able to do is collect that data from multiple sources, from thousands of trucks, so that they can start to predict when there is the potential for service that needs to be done on a truck. And oh, by the way, if there is service that requires certain parts, that those parts are proactively ordered and they're shipped to the service center so that that truck, when it arrives at the service center, it gets the work that it's done, so it's back on the road. So for them, it's about keeping their fleet up, keeping their fleet on the road. And this is something that they really, really struggled to do very early. Again, you're hearing some of it here, the orchestration of collecting all of that data, ingesting it, moving it from source to source, and actually getting some actionable insights that they could proactively push on. That was something that they really, really struggled with. They were doing it with duct tape and baling wire. So they really needed to find a way to streamline that process and to do something that most agencies and organizations are struggling to do, bring that to scale. They're finding ways to put it together with tape, but when they want to actually roll out that to production, it's becoming very, very difficult to do that. So when you bring in that element of scale, when you bring in things like, the requirements for service level agreements, I need to be able to rely on this for production ready for my consumers or for my constituents, what have you. That's when things start to get really, really complex. So we're seeing a lot of cool examples like that, again, across the globe.
Yeah, seeing this supply chain and logistics sort of, stitched together with maintenance is interesting. And I'm hearing a lot about scale and automation, right? That's the only way you can really scale and do it in a repeatable fashion. So it's an interesting use case you're describing there. Michael, how about over at Department of Defense? I know there's a lot of activity going on over there. You want to highlight one program that's you're taking it to new heights in this new role that you're in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd like to bridge from that last topic of conversation about supply chain. We've had a number of exercises to help the department manage its response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which of course is front and center for many decision makers today. We've built this common operating picture that pulls data not only from internal department sources, but from a variety of authoritative external sources, HHS, CDC, Johns Hopkins. There are dozens of them, and of course they're external, so we have no direct control over them. We have no direct control over their data quality, over their analytics, etc. But we needed to bring them all together to create a common operating picture for the department. Now, as a specific example of why that's paid off for us, in one case, we were able to look into our supply chain, including our suppliers, and see specific challenges. There was one supplier that had a problem with delivery of PPE in its supply chain, and we were able to spot it, bring it to their attention before they had become aware of that problem in their supply chain. So really powerful insights into a space that we don't even directly control the data for or the analytics for. In a parallel example, Luke, we've created an installation commander's dashboard that lets as you know, in the Department of Defense, we push authority down where responsibility is. And so we let every installation commander make the decision what health protection condition their installation is at, because that triggers protocols for scanning, interviewing people, temperature scanning, social distancing, etc. In order to do that, we had to create a very dynamic installation commander's dashboard, because the thing about the pandemic is it's intensely local. This county will have a spike, whereas the other 3 counties around your installation may not have a spike. They may be on a downward trend. So you need data that varies from installation to installation to installation. Maybe it's a 5-mile radius at this fort and it's a 50-mile radius here at the Pentagon. And so presenting that information directly in the scope of the authority of that installation commander is a real big data challenge. And we've been able to give them the specific data that they need in order to make the call of what health protection condition their installation should be at. And that affects commuting, that affects relocations of people, that affects a wide range of things, but it's all driven by data. It's not driven by dates, it's not driven by politics, it's driven by data analytics that tell the installation commander what they need to know. And we give them the controls.
Cold hard facts and real-time data. And I love the example of I guess a supply chain for your suppliers, if you will, across the defense industrial base. That's pretty darn impressive. I'm amazed to hear that, quite frankly. Nick, how about at Pure Storage? I know you, once again, you're in the catbird seat there, where you're looking across all of these agencies, across the private sector, and seeing a lot of these various activities. Give us an example of where big data is really coming into play, doing big things at whether it's a private sector or public sector entity.
It is incredibly encouraging to hear the success stories from the government leaders on this panel. And it is obviously striking that you have the big data processing with Cloudera, data orchestration and integration with BMC, and of course, primary data service or data service infrastructure with Pure. All of these things are designed to support the fundamental 4 V's of data, volume, velocity, variety, and veracity, to help decision makers make smart, timely, relevant, accurate, and predictive decisions. So all that was to say that how fast you can know is driven by how fast you can move. And your entire data stack is architected to provide that kind of agility and adaptability. You know, a year ago, we weren't thinking about doing contact tracing and epidemiology and, you know, viral genomic sequencing and things of that nature. We had data distributed across, you know, a wide variety of agencies, whether it was, you know, the Department of Defense or Health and Human Services. We have seen an incredible rise in cybercrime and cyber threat activity as well, because everybody's working outside of their network boundaries and having to remotely come in, which creates, you know, it inverts all of the threat vectors that we've designed our networks to function in government. So what we've tried to support and what we've seen tremendous increases in happening are things like, you know, cyber network simulation and environment simulation, as well as supporting things like folding at home or activities in health and human services that are driven around very large scale gene sequencing. We work with a lot of companies who have large data analytics platforms, but what we're finding, as Henry said, is their ability to get through larger and larger quantities of data is driven in very large degree by being able to pull data through fire hoses rather than soda straws. So our fundamental premise at Pure Storage was designing systems that would support higher volume, higher velocity data service and data access to shorten the time to knowledge and awareness and to shorten the decision-making cycle. So data service has to keep up and has to facilitate, you know, the kind of agility that that is required to provide this orchestration without trying to refactor or rebuild everything to support a new data use case. It just has to be assumed that the data can be provided, delivered, manipulated, reserved, recycled, and then of course backed up and recovered without having to do anything really major or even just trivial support for those kinds of data usages. The infrastructure is designed to support people. People are not designed to support infrastructure. So we're seeing that demand being placed on, you know, software and hardware providers, whether they're, you know, cloud-based or you know, on premises. Customers don't want to have to manage their infrastructure anymore. They don't want to have to work hard to get work done. And that's been, you know, a fundamental premise of ours and for literally since our founding. So we're seeing that the service-based economy and the service-based demand of customers is requiring industry to answer that, because people want to get to work on working on that data and finding out what they need to know in order to make those decisions, as opposed to having to work a very long time just to get the infrastructure necessary to make it happen.
Right. And it really needs to be reliable. It needs to be dependable, right? It needs to be secure.
Without question.
You know, and it needs to be real time and on demand in this kind of environment. All right. Well, we could go all day on that one, but we're going to take another short break here, and we'll be back in a few moments. You're listening to the Federal Executive Forum on the Federal News Network.